We've drawn the supply and demand curve. We've seen how equilibrium price and quantity are achieved. Now there's two final concepts that come out of this graph that are very important to understand, and those are consumer's surplus and producer's surplus. And consumer's surplus and producer's surplus are these two triangles here. This upper one is consumer's surplus, this lower one is producer's surplus. Let's spend just a moment talking about consumer's surplus. And the idea here. Now let's say that this is an equilibrium graph for coconuts. And this line then is made up of individual coconut consumers. And there are some people who just love coconuts. In fact, they would happily eat coconuts 3 meals a day. They can't get enough of the stuff. And they might be willing to pay a very high price for coconut. That might be this person here. Let's say this person, he'd be willing to pay $7 per coconut because he likes them so much. It's worth it to him. Now, he goes to the markets in the center of town and discovers that the equilibrium price of coconuts is $2 a coconut. Well, here he was ready to spend $7 for a coconut, and he finds that the coconut only costs him $2. So when he sees the coconuts there costing just $2, he says to himself, my goodness, what an incredible bargain. Look at this. I'm getting a $5 bargain buying a coconut. So that $5 is what is called his consumer surplus. And then there'll be other people, each, you can imagine this graph is made up of individual points. You get down, say to here, here's someone, she likes coconuts, enough she might be willing to spend $2.05 on coconuts, but that's about as far as she's going to go. So she has a much smaller consumer surplus. And then ultimately you get to someone who's, actually values a coconut at $1.99. So if that person were to buy a coconut at $2, that person would actually be down a penny. So that person's not going to buy a coconut. So the point here is that actually every time you buy something, even if you think the price is outrageous, the fact of the matter is you are buying it because at some deep level you feel like you're getting a bargain. You're getting a deal. And that deal, the term for that, is consumer surplus. Now there is and it basically comprises, let's finish this up, this entire area. Now some consumers are going to get a better deal than others. And the very last consumer here, this person is going to exactly get $2 worth of enjoyment out of a coconut, pay $2 for it, and will be indifferent. And so that there's like one person there who doesn't get any consumer surplus, but everybody else gets consumer surplus, or maybe that one person just doesn't buy it, and the price still ends up settling at $2. Now the mirror image of this is this area here, which is the producer surplus. And the producer's surplus so we could call this consumer surplus. Producer's surplus is the fact that a producer, at least initially at low quantities, might be able to produce something very, very efficiently. Coconuts, the first coconuts are really easy to get, right? You just go collect them and bring them to the marketplace. And, so here, the very first coconuts, maybe that's only $1. So it costs $1 to get those first coconuts, and you go to the marketplace and, hey, you can sell them for $2. what a deal. It's a great business. You're really happy to be in coconut production. Now, as you gather the easy coconuts, you find that it actually is going to cost you more and more. That's why the supply curve slopes up. It costs you more and more to make your coconuts or gather your coconuts. You have to buy, I don't know, tree climbing equipment, and eventually you have to run a coconut plantation, and it all gets more and more expensive. You got to pay overtime to your coconut harvesters and so forth. So it gets more and more expensive, but you keep doing it because you keep realizing, hey, I'd be willing to gather coconuts here for, like $1.90 a time, $1.95. And when I go to the market, I can sell them for $2. So the difference between what the producer would be willing to receive as a price and the price actually received in an equilibrium market is the producer's surplus. And so this is also added up. It's this triangle here. And when you get to this equilibrium point, you've reached a point where if the producer was going to produce any more coconuts, the producer would actually need a price a little bit over $2. And if the price were a little bit over $2, there wouldn't be enough demand to sell all the coconuts, and the producer would have to cut prices and lose money. So the producer stops here just as the consumer stops here. And that's the idea of the consumer surplus. Every time you buy something, you're getting a deal. And a producer surplus, which is basically every time a producer is selling something, the producer should be making a profit. And it's these consumer surplus and producer surpluses that are basically called into being every time somebody buys or sells something. Adding those all up make for a great part of the wealth of the economy as a whole.